Welcome, everybody. My name is Jason Saltzman. I'm a partner at Gowling WLG. I practice corporate finance and securities law in our Toronto office. And I, together with my colleague Susanna Fink in our UK office, co-lead our Israel desk. Our Israel desk. Our Israel desk is a multidisciplinary practice that represents Israeli companies with their global transactions and other legal needs across our international platform when doing business abroad. Our Israel desk recently received multiple accolades in the 2020 edition of Legally Israel 100. At the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a Q&A button. Please feel free to send us questions throughout the course of this webinar. Initially, I'm going to send this over to my friend Oded Orgil, who is the president of the Canada-Israel Chamber of Commerce, to say a few words.
Good afternoon, everybody. Jason, thank you very much. First of all, on behalf of the Canada-Israel Chamber of Commerce's executive, the board of directors and board of governors, we're very excited to participate and co-sponsor this webinar. The Canada-Israel Chamber of Commerce is a national organization whose overall mandate is to help promote bilateral trade between Canadian companies and Israeli companies. Like many people out there, we're very optimistic that the UAE-Israel agreement will usher in a new era of trade in the Middle East and open many doors, and we very much look forward to Canadian companies and individuals' participation in this trade. As president of the Canada Chamber of Commerce, I look forward to working with these Canadian companies to help them provide Canadian knowledge and know-how, further accelerate, promote global trade between UAE, Israel, and help all countries around the world. It's a great pleasure for me to share the stage, as I've done in the past, with Consul General Bahram, an opportunity to hear from our keynote speaker, Eliav Benjamin, as well as all our panelists. And finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our co-sponsor Gowlings, Jason Saltzman, and the entire Gowlings team for co-hosting this event and all their work in putting it together. So Jason, thank you. I'm going to sit back and look forward to hearing the panelists and the speakers myself, just as a participant, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Oded. So we're here today to discuss the potential business opportunities to arise from this historic peace agreement between each of Israel and the UAE. The Abraham Accord was signed less than a month ago on September the 16th, and it's an incredibly exciting time for these two countries to come together. Both countries have the leadership and the deep expertise in a number of key areas. And finally, these countries and the people within these countries have the opportunities to engage. I'd like to now pass the baton over to Galit Bahram, who's a very special guest with us. Galit is the Israeli Consul General in Toronto and for Western Canada. And I'd like Galit to introduce herself and make some opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jason and Oded, for organizing this event. For me personally, after 25 years in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, these are very festive days indeed of new understandings and new agreements that are signed in the Middle East. I've been with the ministry for 25 years now. I served in Cairo for 3 years. I was director of the Department for Palestinian Affairs and Regional Cooperation, also for 3 years. And I've known my ups and downs of achievements and disappointments. When it comes to the Middle East, it's very important for us Israeli diplomats to see how we are perceived on the other side in the Arab world. We all watched with excitement the agreements which were signed at the White House with the United Arab Emirates, the understandings with Bahrain, the new understandings that will lead to agreements on direct flights and tourism, business, free passage of ships. And there are so many opportunities that we need to explore now. The Israel Export Institute, by the way, already started organizing webinars and workshops for thousands of Israelis who are interested in the market in the Gulf states. And many Israelis recognize the great potential when it comes to cyber, to health, to agriculture and other fields. We're also building an Israeli pavilion at Expo 2021, which will be held in Dubai. Definitely positive developments that are happening in the Middle East. This is important, and of course there is the political aspect, the geopolitical aspect, regional aspect, the importance of moderate countries in the Middle East that create an axis of stability, of security and cooperation in a very rough neighborhood. Definitely positive developments, and hopefully that will bring the Palestinians back to the negotiating table with Israel. A word about Eliav Benjamin, my colleague. We served together in Washington. He's one of Israel's best diplomats, highly experienced, and I'm very glad that today we'll have an opportunity to hear from him. I would like to thank again the organizers and all the many people who are participating in attending this webinar. And in these days of Corona, what can I wish you? Stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Galit. Thank you for those words. I would now like to call on Eliav Benjamin, the Director of the Coordination Department of the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to introduce himself and to speak about the peace agreements from an Israeli perspective.
The video? Okay. Can you hear me? I hope you can. Just raise your hand if you can hear me, one of you. Thanks. Okay. So good morning, Toronto, Canada. Good afternoon here from here in Israel. Thank you, Galit. Thank you, Jason, Oded, Tony, for putting this together. This really is a privilege for me. And truthfully, I mean, after Galit's words, maybe I shouldn't say anything else, because anything I can say can just ruin the image. But nonetheless, I'll try and go ahead and talk a bit about really the opportunities that arise from where we're at now with the UAE and with Bahrain, and inshallah, as we say in our region, maybe with other countries as well. And I think some of you mentioned this, and Galit knows this also definitely firsthand. The agreements that we call really the Abrahamic Accords, not just a peace agreement, but it's Abrahamic Accords, which sounds softer. It is softer. It's a people-to-people thing. Is very different than what we have for quite a few decades with Egypt and with Jordan as well. The agreements that have with them, these are peace agreements, and they're great, and we have strategic relations with both Egypt and Israel. But unfortunately, it didn't really kind of sizzle down and have a rippling effect on the societies, and bringing about really real business and real business opportunities, and tourism, and moving of commodities between the countries. And this perhaps is one of the biggest differences and the biggest opportunities that we see with regards to what's going on in the UAE, in particular, the Gulf in general, of course, Bahrain as well. And we very much hope, and this is what we're pushing for as well, apropos opportunities that I'll be speaking about in a minute, when it comes to the region at large, because it is definitely not just our hope, but also our goal to, through these agreements, to have more regional cooperation, and hopefully also to be able to get the Egyptians, the Jordanians, and many others on board this wagon and this opportunity. So I encourage all of us, as I encourage also the business community here in Israel, and as we encourage the business community in the Gulf, to think not only on a bilateral level between point to point between two countries, but to think also in the large scope of things. How can we make some regional things happen together? Whether it's transferring of goods through land from through Jordan, whether it's a trilateral or quadruple cooperation in various ways. These are things that I would encourage. Having said that, we do need to remember that the agreements with the Emiratis and with the Bahrainis allow now for direct trade between our countries, but unlike perhaps what some business entities in Israel think, it doesn't necessarily allow for tomorrow morning for them to be able to start I don't know, marketing their produce, if you want, in Saudi Arabia or Kuwait, places which still have a ban on having formal ties and relations with Israel, and we can't see a blue and white or made in Israel product on in the shops in those places. These are things that are still work in progress, but we are working towards them. I'm saying this because both UAE and even more so Bahrain, I mean, they're great places, and there are a huge amount of opportunities that I will go into now and elaborate upon. But a lot of business companies and business people see them also somewhat of a gateway to the greater Middle East, which by potential this is true, but in reality at this point in time, we need to look at it in a more limited way, again, right now. But again, the opportunities are there, and those that put their foot in the door right now are definitely going to enjoy the fruits after later on. Now, UAE in particular sees itself, and rightly so, not only as a regional hub, which it is, both for logistics, for cargo, and for many other things towards the Middle East, towards the Far East. But it also sees itself, and rightly so, as a center for technologies, for their own technologies. They, it's in a way I'm comparing. I spent a few years in Shanghai, China, way back in the day, and they, they always want, the biggest, the finest, the top technology, and so on and so forth. And there are quite a number of similarities. I'm not to draw too many similarities, but there are some similarities in this regard of wanting to shine. I'm saying this in the most positive way of things, which means that companies that want to operate there, are competing with international and multinational companies that have been in the Gulf for many years, have invested tons, including presence on the ground, things that Israeli companies, by and large, were limited in doing up to recently. So they're competing, and in order to be able to succeed, what the Israeli industry needs to prove is the added value. What shines? What will help the Emirates? What will help the Bahrainis, if you want, shine in the neighborhood? What's the top technology or niche technology that nobody else in the world can offer, for instance? So these are things that we need to think about. The other thing is, and this is fundamental, and some of you, I assume, know this from dealings with other places around the world, dealing with the Emiratis and Gulf, the Gulf countries in general, places that I've been, basically been in touch with all the countries there, in some way, shape, or form. It's not just coming, closing a deal, let's move on. It doesn't work this way. And this is something that we're trying also to reflect to our business community back here in Israel. It's it's very nice to have. It's heartwarming for me to get approaches from the top CEOs from top companies that we can all think of, saying, "Oh, look, I'm not asking for much. Just get me 1% of the market share in UAE, and I'm set for life." Okay. Again, this is another similarity in a way that I'm drawing to my time in Shanghai. So it doesn't work that way. Ideally, this is what I'm going to work for. This is what I'm going to push for. But it doesn't work in such an easy way. In general, it works on relationships. It works on building trust, on getting to know the right people, and I'll elaborate on this also in a minute. And it takes time, and it takes a lot of investment. And when I say investment, it means, yes, capital investment as well. It means that I'm investing now, and in 2 years' time, I may not see anything in return. I may well see something, but I may not. And there are very large multinationals that have invested there for years and haven't seen too much of an ROI, but it's part of life, as we know. and it's part of building the relationship. And when I say long-term investment, it's a long-term investment in building the relationship. It's a long-term investment on having presence on the ground. And there are all kinds of methods of going about this. You know, if you want to open shop there, you have to have a partner there who will have by law 51% as a shareholder. It doesn't necessarily mean that he gets 51% of the revenue, but at least legally he has to have majority share. And it means that physically we have to be there, coming back and forth, which naturally nowadays with Zoom, apropos of COVID and what we're doing now, makes it slightly more challenging. But that's the best way to go about it. Look, I mean, over the years, as the foreign ministry, we've been dealing with the region for over 25 years now. It started with the Oslo Accords when our late president, then foreign minister, called a couple of my colleagues aside in Washington, said, "Okay, start making connections with the Arab world," and that's how it basically started. And since then, we've been cultivating these relations, and a lot of it has been on the business side. Many Israeli companies have been operating there, and I would say that over the past 20 years or so, we've helped, I would say, over 500 Israeli companies work there. And it doesn't sound much on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's quite a lot when one takes into consideration that the ability to work there up to recently was only for those companies who were able to operate not under an Israeli umbrella. Those who had a sister company or another company listed in, I don't know, Canada, US, Germany, or elsewhere, and that the representatives of those companies were able to travel with not with Israeli passports. Of course, everything was kosher, everything was known for those who needed to know, but in order not to embarrass anybody, it was done this way. This was until recently, and now we've changed the phase, and as you can imagine, we're receiving, I would say, I wouldn't exaggerate by saying hundreds of approaches per week since the joint declaration in mid-August by companies anywhere from the top banks down to, as one of my colleagues likes referring to them, not in a bad way, but some of us are in the Jewish business, so the Shmata business or the Gatkes business, if you want, and they're all important, and we all have something to offer in this regard, and we deal with every single one of these approaches and requests that we get. One more thing before I dive into the different sectors that we see as the key opportunities or where we would focus more is perhaps also to mention that the approaches that we're receiving really are from all over. We're working and scrambling in a way vis-a-vis our Emirati counterparts, and I'm focusing now on the Emirates, although this is also true for Bahrain. We're really scrambling together with them to find the right people, to find the right connections, both on the government level and in the private sector, and everything that's in between. And perhaps one last remark in this regard, and I alluded to this earlier, is the importance of knowing who to operate with and who to work with. A lot of people, claim to be, close to this person, close to that person, have experience here, have experience there, related to this family or that family. And in many cases, it may be true, but we really, really have to identify who these people are really connected with, what their track record is, what their interests are as far as we can understand. And we also need to understand that there are also some sensitivities, not to say intrinsicies, between different entities there. And there is also a very big difference, nearly I don't know whether to say nearly, maybe really a competition, sometimes more polite, and sometimes less, between Abu Dhabi and Dubai, for instance, on who takes the leadership and where we put the focus on. And this is even without mentioning the other five emirates, whether it's Sharjah or Fujairah, Ras Al Khaimah, and so on, which are less developed, but they're also part of the UAE. And this is, by the way, and already I'll give you some kind of a tip. I would look at these places because these places are less developed, because most people are looking specifically at Abu Dhabi and Dubai, kind of looking for the rock under the light, if you want. And perhaps these areas, which are a bit more virgin in a way, could serve as opportunities for some of the companies who have something good to offer in this regard. So it is very, very important to identify the right partners to work with there. And again, it starts with building a relationship, and then it continues with doing business. And this is also something which is important to realize. And again, I can't stress enough the importance of the direct interaction. The COVID-19 is a huge hurdle and burden on all of us, especially on the private sector, but also on us diplomats, because we believe in the person-to-person connection, and it's difficult to substitute it even with Zoom or webinars and Team or whatever platform it might be. But we are all in it together. I would, however, say that those who have the opportunity to make the direct physical contact, you will receive a heartwarm welcome and will be very, very appreciated for making the effort, for kind of taking the risk, if you want, in this regard. Sectors.
Thank you, Eliav. It's Jason Saltzman. I thought we would reserve a discussion on the sectors to the panel. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to introduce the panel, and certainly we're grateful that you will participate in the panel and can make comments about the sectors in the context of the panel, if that's all right. So
the floor is yours. I'm done.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to now introduce the remaining members of our panel, in addition to Eliav, which will be my Dubai partners, Suhail Mirza and Tony Fielding, who are both at the Gowling Dubai office. And Suhail Mirza is a partner in a Dubai-based corporate practice. He advises UAE and international businesses on corporate and commercial transactions, including M&A, private equity, and corporate structuring and reorganizations. Suhail is active in the infrastructure sector, advising on projects in the Middle East and Africa region, acting for government authorities, off-takers, sponsors, and lenders on PPP transactions in the energy and utility sector. He's recommended as an expert UAE-based lawyer by Legal Directories 500, EMEA, and IFLR 100. And Tony Fielding is a partner and head of our technology group in Dubai. He has over 20 years experience as a specialist legal advisor to global technology, media, and communications companies. His practice is focused on emerging and disruptive technologies, including cryptocurrencies, blockchain, AI, autonomous vehicles, as well as e-commerce, data monetization, infratech, and smart cities, among other areas of technology. Tony's work in the region has been recognized by the Oath Middle East Legal Awards, where the team was awarded the TMT Team of the Year in 2019. So I'm going to start asking some questions. So Suhail, what do you see as the key sectors in which you expect to see an uplift in Israel UAE investment following the Abraham Accords? And certainly, Eliav, feel free to pipe in on sector discussion as well in that context.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks, Eliav. That's quite an expansive, and you clearly know your stuff, because a lot of the commercial knowledge and some of the legal knowledge was actually completely on point. So that was really excellent, Eliav, from you. The way I see it, I mean, I'm a corporate lawyer. I've been based in the region for 12 years now. Before that, I was in London. And when I arrived to Dubai, it was very much treated as an emerging market. emerging market in the sense that there was still infrastructure deficit and investment required in the region to allow it to compete with other economies. And you've got to bear in mind that this is a very young country. We're only going to celebrate our 50th anniversary next year. So it's still a developing economy, but that said, it punches well above its weight. And it's one of those places, as you can see from my virtual display of the Burj Khalifa, it punches well above its weight when it comes to infrastructure, and that has actually come on the back of huge amounts of oil revenue. But as my 12 years here have shown me, we are looking towards the future now, and we're moving away from a hydrocarbons economy and the reliance on hydrocarbons, and that's partly due to economic reasons, the drop in oil prices being the principal reason, also due to a shift in investment and people's appetite for fossil fuels. And as a result of that, the UAE economy is looking at refocusing itself and positioning itself more on the tech. And this relationship with Israel, in my mind, I think the emphasis is partnership and the creation of a corridor, whereby there is more bilateral investment between the two countries, whereby we see coming from Israel, from my perspective, a lot of investment in R&D and a lot of harnessing of our tech sector. And that can include cybersecurity, information technology, artificial intelligence, which artificial intelligence I'm sure Tony will pick up on, but also sectors such as desalination. I do a lot of IWP water desalination projects, and I'm sure there is some really key technology and intellectual property which we can benefit from, and that would mean working alongside our Israeli partners to develop those sectors. And ultimately, I see this as an economic win-win. I appreciate there's a lot of politics behind the scene, but as a corporate lawyer practicing in the UAE, I would expect to see a serious uplift in investments in the tech sector, and that's the key sector from my perspective. Beyond that, as Elliot mentioned, the UAE has always been known as a trading hub. We've always been a logistics hub and a trading hub, and that's been underpinned by some of the fantastic infrastructure that we have here, principally the Jebel Ali Free Zone, which is home to DP World. And I know that there was a first ship landed at Port Haifa yesterday. So that trading's already commenced. And the Emiratis themselves are known as traders. So Emiratis will buy and sell products. And if this corridor can achieve that, it will provide a gateway to North Africa and also into India. But there is much talk about the corridor being one which is not just simply going between the UAE and Israel, but also beyond that further afield into the subcontinent and into North Africa. So it's very much bringing Israel into what I call the MENASA, Middle East, North Africa and South Asia region, and bringing and creating a much more global view to this regionalized economy, if I can say that.
Yeah, thanks, Suhail. I'm going to ask Tony about his experience working previously with Israeli tech companies, having worked as a regional general counsel for Comverse Inc., a very successful global IT and telecom company. And I want to ask Tony how he sees companies working together from a cultural, legal, or business perspective, and any particular challenges that he foresees. Sorry, Tony, you're on mute.
I just realised as the tech lawyer, I forgot to click the button.
It happens at least once every
It always
Zoom
happens
call,
to me. It always happens to me. Thanks, Jason, and thanks, Ilya, as well as Suhail for their comments. And I think, being invited to attend this event is probably one of many that's going to happen in the short term. And I've noticed that there's a lot more webinars and a lot more dialogue that's happening across the region between the countries. And I was very lucky that in a previous lifetime, I worked for a very prominent and a very active Israeli company called Comverse Networks in Tel Aviv, and I was very lucky to spend time in Tel Aviv working very closely with the team there when they were developing a whole range of new technologies particularly in the telecoms space. And this was during the time of sort of 3G, 3.5G, 4G developments. And I think it's really interesting because whilst obviously historically and politically and geopolitically there are a whole range of differences that sit between these different countries, my experience of working with Israeli companies and people as well as sort of Emiratis and people in Dubai is actually strikingly similar. And I think one of the reasons for that is there is this cultural preference for sort of interpersonal relationships and interpersonal building of relationships and face-to-face and meetings and developing real connections in a way that perhaps Zoom doesn't necessarily lend itself to, but this may well be the way of the future. But I think culturally that is something that underpins the way that businesses have operated in both countries, and I think will continue to operate now that this dialogue is definitely well and truly open. I think they're both particularly ambitious nations. Obviously, Israel is known as the startup nation. It has something like 6,500 startups. We here have I think 2,300 at latest count. So I think you're both looking, from a tech perspective, you're looking at countries that are both Israel, historically, very, very successful in the tech space, and UAE, very ambitious in the tech space and well-funded in order to sort of deploy and develop technology. So I see that sort of ambition matched with sort of the cultural nuances of how they like to do business sits very well together. I think also, having worked with Israelis, they're incredibly robust individuals when it comes to negotiations, and they're very solid and they're very straightforward. And the UAE similarly likes to negotiate and likes to strike a bargain. And I think that at a very practical level, those things between the countries, particularly from a lawyer's perspective, will become very evident. And I don't think that they are a problem. I think, and nor are they really a challenge. I think that they complement one another in respect of how we will successfully navigate a whole range of bilateral trade agreements, but for me in particular, technology and innovation agreements. I think there's a healthy respect on both sides for good negotiation and heavy negotiation between the countries, and I'm looking forward to that. I don't see any challenges at the moment. I mean, there are always challenges from a legal perspective when you're negotiating between countries and in relation to new technologies. I prefer to look at it as sort of real opportunities between the countries to explore sort of differences between the legal systems, as well as ways to sort of, really develop the opportunities that sit there, particularly from a tech space.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks for that important and interesting perspective. And Eliav, I'll ask you to comment on it if there are other sectors that you'd want to mention, but also if you can comment on the enthusiasm on the part of the Israeli people and the business community regarding the Abraham Accord.
So I'll start with the former, just to add on to what Sohail and Tony raised. I agree 100%. I mean, the tech issue is probably the most, let's say, the sexiest thing, if you want, the most interesting for both sides, and really the fact that the UAE considers itself, and rightly so, as a technological hub and very much kind of in the forefront of things, is a wonderful match for the Israeli technology. But I wouldn't necessarily just limit it to cyber, IT, AI, and areas like that, but rather broaden the scope also to areas which we would see as traditional sectors, but put the high-tech part into it. Like, for instance, everything that has anything related to agriculture, what's known as food security, as a wholesale name, if you want. Something the Emiratis have raised with us already quite a number of months ago. Huge interest from their side on desert farming. Okay, I mean, the whole slogan, if you want, from Israel, making the desert bloom. Yes, they want part of that, and the difference between 42 degrees centigrade in the Arava and 50 degrees centigrade in the shade in Abu Dhabi isn't necessarily that great when it comes to technologies. So something which is definitely relevant. And this is something that we're working on very, very strongly with the best technologies from our end, both as a kind of a whole package thing of how to grow things, how to approach it, but also with specific technologies. Another area is medicine, the whole medical field. COVID-19, of course, kind of raised this above the surface, but something which they've been investing on for quite a number of years, of developing their own health system, medical system, state-of-the-art hospitals and technologies. But we sense that they are somewhat lacking the know-how of how to actually put this into practice. And I think we have something to offer here, both on the training, but also with the technologies. Just one word, perhaps, I think Suhail, you raised this as an opportunity with regards to water. Desal, I'm not so sure, because at the end of the day, I think that the largest desal operations are in the UAE. And I think what Israel has to offer in this regard could be in niche areas of desal, but not necessarily a holistic approach in this regard. So this, I would be a bit more careful about. Yes, there are opportunities, but I wouldn't necessarily jump into it. And I would agree with you 100% that it's about relationships. It's about partnerships. It's not about Israelis coming and selling there, or Israelis coming and attracting investments into Israel. It really is about relationships in the best way possible. And once you build this relationship, then the sky's the limit on everything that the one can do, and hopefully also bring more business also to the legal people involved in these issues as well. So that's just my 2 cents on the various, just to add on a few of the sectors. One more thing, the emphasis, we're putting a huge amount of emphasis on the economic stuff. And this comes also from our foreign minister, it comes from our prime minister, and it comes very much so from the Emiratis and now from the Bahrainis as well. The idea to show the benefit of these relationships to the peoples of all countries involved. And the benefits come not necessarily from showing that we're fighting, the evil axis together, which is a big part of it, it's true, from a strategic point of view. But at the end of the day, it's how does the person on the street enjoy the fruits of this, literally and figuratively. Having Israeli mangoes being sold in the market served in a top Michelin restaurant in Dubai could be a great thing, for instance.
Thanks, Eliav. So, Suhail, I want to ask you why and how an Israeli company would consider establishing a presence in the UAE as a Gulf Cooperation Council hub.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a fairly compelling investment opportunity in Dubai. UAE, when I say Dubai, I should say UAE more generally. But across the UAE, it's obviously a federation of 7 different emirates. One of the key advantages of setting up here is that it is zero tax on corporation tax and on income tax. So anybody looking at investing capital in the region, having a base in the UAE makes it a very efficient, tax efficient place to do business because of the tax rationale. But beyond that, there's the fantastic logistics and infrastructure here. We would like to say that we're positioned well in advance of other GCC countries, and I'm very much seeing this as Eliav said, as a hub to do business across the region, not necessarily just in the GCC. Obviously, there's still normalization agreements to be put in place with our other GCC member states other than Bahrain. But it's a great place to do business, to get access into Oman, to Kuwait, and further afield to India and Africa. So having a holding company or some kind of corporate structure which is registered in Dubai or the UAE is very tax efficient. UAE government has been very shrewd about entering into double taxation treaties with its partners. Therefore, it makes it more attractive when it comes to repatriating income from trading activities across the region. And then more generally, we do have robust laws as well. And one of the issues that all foreign investors look at is the legal system. I operate within what is known as the Dubai International Financial Center. We have an equivalent in Abu Dhabi, which is called the Abu Dhabi Global Markets. and they're actually common law frameworks. So you'd find it surprising that within the desert, we have an enclave which has a legal system that is modeled on English common law, and any company wishing to operate within the DIFC, or for that matter the ADGM, can rely on laws which are akin to English law and apply common law principles. And also the language of business is English. Once you step out of the DIFC, admittedly, you have to deal with local law and Arabic language lawyers, but we can navigate through that. The whole infrastructure is already here. You've got international law firms like ourselves, and you've got the other advisors. So anybody wanting to do business in this region, and an Israeli company wanting to set up, we will make life easy for you because the system is already here. And the government is encouraging this more and more so. I mean, like I said, I've been here for 12 years, and each year there's more progressive announcements on doing business in the region. And the tax situation hasn't changed, other than for the fact that they introduced VAT a few years back, which was to deal with the downfall in oil revenue, as you'd expect. But there is no plans to introduce corporation tax or income tax. So I can't overemphasize that fact. Compared to other jurisdictions, we're very, very tax efficient. Going back to one of Elliot's points about restrictions on foreign ownership as well. I mentioned the progressive nature of the economy here and the government. There has been some movement towards allowing 100% foreign ownership, which is a plus. And that's particularly so on the tech sector. So we can marry all this together. So anybody with a compelling business proposition to invest capital in the region, and for that matter, to bring in R&D and new technology, they can obtain 100% foreign ownership. And within the region, we also have what are known as free zones, where 100% foreign ownership is permitted. So subject to getting the right corporate structure in place, it is possible to get 100% foreign ownership, which is unlike some of our other neighboring countries where still this concept of 100% foreign ownership is relatively restricted. So that's another positive. And there used to always be the tagline that being based in Dubai or being based in UAE, you're no less than 3 hours away from 30% of the world, and no less than 6 hours away from the rest, the other 66% of the world, because we feel like we're in the center of the universe here. We have two fantastic airlines, Emirates and Etihad, and I didn't want to talk about COVID, but we can't avoid it. Once we get this wretched COVID out of the way, it'll be very much business as usual. So it's a fantastic hub to be based. And like I said, I've been here for 12 years. I've seen lots of clients, international corporates, who've said we want to be based in Dubai because we can take phone calls from China in the morning, and we can take phone calls from the US in the evening. And to bring Israel into play, a regional headquarter in Dubai to do business across the globe is a fantastic and compelling proposition from my perspective.
Thank you, Suhail. I now want to turn the topic over more specifically into technology. And there was already a major deal that was announced last week, and that was between the Israeli venture capital firm OurCrowd and Al Nabuda Investments, which will see $100 million of Emirati capital going into Israeli tech companies. Now, I want to ask Tony about how this would go on the other side. This September, the tech magazine Wired stated that the normalization agreement will enable the UAE to turbocharge its tech industry. Tony, do you agree with the statement? And if so, why is that?
Yeah, I do agree with the statement that it will assist the UAE in turbocharging its sort of tech industry and its innovation. And, you know, I particularly like Eliad's sort of metaphor around, you know, the UAE wanting to shine, given that we've got this new dialogue. And I think that one of the ways that the UAE, with Israel's help, that we will shine is in the tech sector. It's very true that the tech sector will enable both countries to sort of work very closely together to sort of achieve certain ambitions. But the UAE obviously is working towards a national vision, and part of its pillar of its national vision, like many of the countries around the GCC, is sort of digital innovation and encouraging sort of digital adoption within its local communities. And I think that both Israel being the tech hub that it's historically been, and the ambition and the appetite for new disruptive technologies, new deployments in the UAE, funding that's been made available in relation to new technologies being deployed in the UAE. You know, there's very much this sort of, and I'm not a fan of the word, but there are very much synergies between both countries and their knowledge and their ability to share that knowledge in order to sort of facilitate the growth in technology here in the UAE, and not just for the national vision for the UAE, but I just think to develop the way that the UAE has placed itself globally in the market, wanting to shine and its ambitions to shine and not just be on par with other countries, but to actually be a leader in particular industries. And I think part of what this collaboration between Israel and the UAE can bring, or what will come certainly from the Israeli side, is historically this great knowledge and scope and depth of knowledge from sort of research and development, and what that will bring to the UAE and the ability for us to sort of cross-collaborate and across sectors, not just across countries. And I think that will be something that will both build on already existing informal relationships that we have between the countries, particularly in the tech space, but also in relation to a myriad of untapped potentials in the tech space that we probably don't even know about. And Eliav was talking previously about artificial intelligence. I mean, we're just at the moment beginning to understand how artificial intelligence can be employed and deployed across various sectors. And I think both countries will certainly work very hard together to explore that and really develop that across key sectors, and particularly like oil and gas, energy, desalination, resource management, water security. Those types of things will really sort of see the development across sectors like artificial intelligence. I also think you've got this general know-how that sits within Israel that we certainly have a certain amount of in the UAE, but I think there is a depth of knowledge there that will really underpin some of the ambitions that we have here in the UAE that we want to roll out, not just in the government sector, but in the private sector. And one of the flow-on effects of that obviously will be, I see startup activity. I mean, startup activity is already increasing here in the UAE as a result of the normalization agreement. And I think that it will only continue to increase. And I think that will be partly because of the learnings that we will get from the startup and the entrepreneurial environment from Israel, but also a lot of the developments here, such as the DIFC's FinTech Hive. There's a lot of investment that's going into, for example, FinTech. So there is definitely this match between knowledge, experience and ambition and funding between the two countries that I think comes together in this perfect tech storm that enables real sort of acceleration of technology here in the UAE in the way that the government is looking for.
Great, thanks for that answer, Tony. We're starting to receive quite a number of questions from attendees in the audience, and I thought I would just ask some of them, and we could just open these to the floor more generally. So the first question is, will it be safe to say that the current agreement is focused more on harvesting the economic benefits in the region rather than exploring the comprehensive peace deal in the region, which may not be possible in the short run? And I think Eliav touched on that a little bit. I don't know if you have any more specific responses to this question, Eliav, or if anybody else wants to pipe in.
Yeah, perhaps I'd like to add maybe just a couple of more words about this. Yes, we're putting a big emphasis on the economic prospects. And the idea is that the societies will realize that through economy, that the economy is the way to basically develop things. And that countries across the region will realize that through joining hands, and the region is getting smaller and smaller, closer and closer. And again, COVID is proving this again as well. The opportunities that arise through the economic and business sector can in turn, we believe, bring about more political collaboration. So as opposed to the way that we have been trying for over so many years, the top-down approach, it's now in a way a bottom-up approach of through the business community. So this is definitely an emphasis from our end.
Thank you. Suhail, we received another question relating to the legal system in the UAE, particularly with respect to the court system. And the specific question is whether the court system is known for non-local bias. And is there any reliance or guidance on Delaware law for corporate law issues?
I think there's two questions in there. On the perception of the local courts and bias, I think that's one question there. There's a couple of ways to tackle this. In terms of local bias, there's multiple systems of forums for dispute resolution in this region, in the UAE, and I say that you have a couple of options at the outset. So you can either go for arbitration if you have no faith in the court systems, and that's not just a UAE issue, that's globally. International companies will prefer to have their disputes determined by arbitration, and you're quite open in the UAE to choose an arbitration which is and the seat of arbitration being Dubai or even Abu Dhabi, or more specifically the Dubai International Financial Center where I'm based, and you can have your own arbitration rules. Those arbitration rules can be DIFC LCIA arbitration rules, or they can be pure ICC arbitration rules, or you can go for DIAC, which is the Dubai International Arbitration Center rules. I'm not going to go into chapter and verse, but you can see there that there is huge amount of flexibility to actually avoid going to courts altogether, and a lot of international companies will prefer to avoid going to court for a number of commercial reasons, including confidentiality, but also the UAE is party to the New York Convention. So you can even you can get an arbitral award from outside the UAE and have it enforced in the UAE, and in principle, UAE courts will enforce an international arbitral award. So there's no reason to actually choose Dubai or the UAE as a forum for your arbitration. Saying that, if you do have to go through the court system, then there's two options. You don't have to go through the local courts. You can actually elect to choose the DIFC courts or the courts in the ADGM, the Abu Dhabi Global Markets. And those courts are all manned by common law judges and barristers. So you've got the UK circuit of barristers as well as other common law barristers, and you have the head of the DIFC courts. Previously was a Singaporean individual, but now has been succeeded by an Emirati, now that he's been trained in common law. So you actually have a court system which is very friendly and based around a common law if you choose the DIFC or ADGM. Now, there might be instances where you need to go and litigate in the local courts, and that's when the question of bias will come in, because first and foremost, the dispute is undertaken in Arabic and the proceedings are undertaken in Arabic language. And secondly, you're going to get an Emirati judge, because only an Emirati judge has the capacity to determine that dispute. And that's when questions come in: is my counterparty the government? Am I likely to succeed in taking action against the government? And then a lot has happened. I mean, in principle, it's going to be an objective forum for dispute resolution. And you will find that you will have representation independently, and you'll have your own local advocate acting on your behalf. And the law is based on the civil code, so and it's codified. It's written in English as well as Arabic. So your counsel will be able to take you through that process. Fundamentally, is there a perception of bias? The UAE government has moved a long way towards removing that perception of bias by introducing these alternative forums for dispute resolution, arbitration, DIFC courts. So you don't need to go through that initial hurdle of having to deal with the local courts. You can actually elect to go through one of these alternative forums for dispute resolution, and that will answer your question because it's much more investor friendly. And so, and the government has encouraged all of the municipal authorities and the federal authorities to actually agree to these alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. So if you're an international bank and you've loaned money to a UAE company, chances are that you will choose arbitration or the DIFC courts. And we do a lot of project finance transactions where we do not go to the local courts for any of those sorts of disputes. So that will take away the element of bias. But notwithstanding that, I think the government, as a policy decision, is trying to take away some of this perception of bias. It's a difficult one because from an outsider's perspective, it's a very alien jurisdiction. But once you get yourself within the system and you speak to people like myself, we can address those issues and those risks. But it's a country risk which will come up in any jurisdiction, not just UAE. The second question about Delaware law, I mean, I think that was a technical question of US law. I'm just having to look at the question again. Remind me again, Jason, what was it? It was something to do with.
Is there any reliance or guidance on Delaware law for corporate law issues?
Is any reliance? I'm not sure exactly what that question is heading for. All I would say is, and I'm happy to take the conversation separately, but with the individual who's raised that question. But there is a freedom of choice of law. I think that might be the question. So you actually can, you're not bound to choose UAE law or English law or even DIFC law. You can actually have a contract subject to Delaware law. So if there is a question of Delaware law, and the dispute is being heard in a local court, the UAE courts will actually invite a Delaware law expert to be available at that hearing, and will take representations from a Delaware law expert. So you can have a US attorney in attendance at that hearing. That might answer the question, but
okay. Thank you, Sahel. I want to use the remaining couple minutes to answer another important question that's come in, and that is, for those interested in exploring business opportunities in the region, like what are the next steps? And I guess I'll direct that question to anybody who wants to take a first stab at a response.
I'll just say this very, very briefly, and then of course Tony and Sir, if you want to add, of course, find the right partner. Find somebody who's got a real presence on the ground and real connections. Do your homework towards this. Don't just jump in on the first one who offers his assistance or first name you find in the yellow pages. Find somebody who's got the connections, do your homework, and then go into it.
You know, I was going to leave the question to Sahel, but I was just going to jump in quickly from a tech perspective. You know, one of the initial questions I would suggest is, you know, what is the type of business and or service or technology that you are looking to either develop or pursue or deploy in the region? And in respect of that, then look at what is the most appropriate free zone that exists within the UAE that might match up to the technology or the service that you're looking to sort of deploy or provide within the region through your local partner. For example, you have Dubai Media City, you have Dubai Internet City, you have healthcare, Dubai Healthcare City. So all of these free zones have particular regulations that apply to particular types of service offerings and ancillary services that are sort of aligned to the nature of the business that you are looking to provide. And again, I would also say that if you are a particularly risk-averse entity looking to enter business here, the DIFC, as Sahel said before, you know, and the ADGM are both very solid, robust, common law-based legal systems that have regulations, court and processes and procedures that will protect you and your interests in the event that there are any sort of disputes. But that's just my 5 cents worth. So
okay, well, thank you, Tony. And I'm mindful of time, and I want to use this last 30 seconds just to thank everybody for their attendance today, and especially thank you to our dignified guests, as well as our team at Gowling WLG, who has organized this event, and special thanks to the Chamber and Oded for participating. We are, needless to say, we are incredibly excited about the opportunities that the agreements present to all of us, as well as our clients around the world, and the synergies that will be created from them. And we look forward to future updates and discussions on this fast-growing area of opportunity. Thank you.